Alright, family. Stop what you're doing, because Rick Ross may have just crossed a line no rapper his age is supposed to touch on camera. Rick Ross did not send a subliminal. Rick Ross did not throw a 2-bar jab on a leaked snippet. Rick Ross walked into a studio, put on a suit, queued up a beat with T.I. riding shotgun, and dropped a full visual where a body meant to represent 50 Cent is laid out cold on the floor, white sheet on top, yellow crime scene tape wrapped around the scene, and the camera lingering like it wants you to feel every second of it. Rick Ross is 50 years old. 50 Cent is 50 years old. And somehow, in the year 2026, these two grown men are still going harder than rappers half their age. Here's the wild part. This feud is not new. This feud is not fresh. This beef between Rick Ross and 50 Cent has been running for almost 2 decades, 19 straight years of shots, jabs, lawsuits, exposed secrets, dragged family members, viral memes, and now, a mock funeral on a music video. That is longer than most marriages last. That is longer than some of y'all have been alive. That is almost the entire adult life of Rick Ross the artist, and almost the entire post-get-rich-or-die-tryin' era for 50 Cent. And if you thought time was going to cool this thing down, Rick Ross just proved you flat wrong. Before we get into every layer of this, hit that subscribe button, drop a like if you're locked in, and let the algorithm know you want the real tea served with no chaser. Because trust me, there is a lot to unpack, and by the end of this, you're going to have a very strong opinion. Now let's get to work. Rick Ross' new track is called Mahogany Caskets. It is featured on his Set in Stone project, and it is not a whisper. It is a full statement. Rick Ross opens the record like a man who has been waiting for this moment. T.I. jumps on the second verse, and if you know anything about T.I.'s own history with 50 Cent, you already know this pairing was not accidental. This was a two-man ambush dressed up as a song. And then the visual dropped. The moment the video hit timelines, the culture froze. Rick Ross delivers a line that goes at 50 Cent by name, not a nickname, not a subliminal, not a wink, the actual name. And while Rick Ross is delivering that line, the camera cuts to a figure laid out on the floor, covered in a white sheet, with bright yellow tape circling the body like a homicide scene from a network drama. Roll it back. Look at it again. That is not rap theater. That is a message. And 50 Cent noticed immediately. Now, before anybody in the comments tells me I'm reaching, I want you to imagine two 24-year-old rappers doing this exact same visual in 2026. Two young artists from Brooklyn or Miami or Atlanta putting a body on the ground meant to represent a rival, covering it with a sheet, wrapping it with tape, and dropping it on YouTube. What would the reaction be? Every blog would call them reckless. Every podcast would call it irresponsible. Every uncle in the barbershop would shake his head and say the youth is out of control. But Rick Ross gets to do the same thing at 50 years old, with grandkids in the house and a business empire behind him, and half the internet is treating it like standard rap sport. That inconsistency is the story nobody is telling. That is the piece of this puzzle that has me raising my eyebrow. Here is the receipt. Roll the tape. Clip, Rick Ross snippet, the line about 50 Cent and the visual of the covered body with yellow tape. You saw it. You heard it. And you cannot unsee it. Rick Ross made a choice. Rick Ross knew what that image would do. Rick Ross knew every clip account, every reaction channel, every timeline in hip-hop would freeze on that frame. And Rick Ross did it anyway. That is not an accident. That is calculated. That is the boss making sure the message lands. Let me walk you through why this feud between Rick Ross and 50 Cent goes so much deeper than a music video. Because if you don't know the history, you might think Rick Ross is just going too far for no reason. But the truth is, both of these men have crossed lines that would have ended careers in any other era. Rewind the tape. Years back, 50 Cent pulled a move that was arguably the most personal shot in modern hip-hop. 50 Cent flew out the mother of Rick Ross' child. 50 Cent brought her on camera. 50 Cent let her sit down and speak on Rick Ross' financial situation, on his personal life, on his history. And that was not all. 50 Cent also brought Rick Ross' son into the frame, a young man the internet later nicknamed in different ways depending on the timeline. 50 Cent turned Rick Ross' family into content. And that alone should have been the moment somebody in the room said, "We are going too far." But nobody did. Because in this feud, nobody has ever pumped the brakes. Then came the biggest weapon 50 Cent ever pulled. 50 Cent exposed Rick Ross' past as a correctional officer. Now let me be clear about what that actually meant. Back in the mid-90s, Rick Ross worked as a correctional officer in Florida for a stretch of time before pivoting fully into music. When 50 Cent surfaced that information, the culture did not know how to process it. Because at that same moment, Rick Ross was being compared to the biggest voices in hip-hop history. Rick Ross was being marketed as a street general. And 50 Cent walked in with paperwork. Rick Ross has since addressed it more than once, saying he only held the position briefly, that he never locked anybody up, and that the story has been dragged past its actual size. But if that reveal happened today, in this current social media climate, the timeline would eat Rick Ross alive for a full month straight. Every screenshot would trend. Every interview would resurface. Every bar he ever wrote about the streets would get rescored. Rick Ross survived that moment because it happened before the timeline had teeth. Then came the BET Awards. A backstage confrontation broke out. MMG members were in the building. G-Unit members were in the building. And in the chaos, Gunplay's MMG chain got snatched. Video hit the net. Photos hit the net. And once again, the beef between Rick Ross and 50 Cent leveled up from music to something more physical, more personal, more embarrassing depending on which side of the fence you sat on. So when Rick Ross drops Mahogany Caskets with T.I., an artist who has had his own long, ugly public issues with 50 Cent, including moments where T.I.'s entire family got dragged into online battles, you have to understand what this really is. This is not one shot. This is a coalition. This is Rick Ross saying, "I'm not fighting alone this round." Here's the wild part about the T.I. and 50 Cent piece. 50 Cent kept the pressure on T.I.'s household for months. 50 Cent posted pictures. 50 Cent cracked jokes. 50 Cent tagged T.I.'s wife in captions that had the internet in a chokehold. And T.I.'s family, every one of them from every generation, jumped online to fire back. That is what happens with 50 Cent. 50 Cent does not need a diss track. 50 Cent needs a phone and Wi-Fi. One post lands, everybody responds, and the drama spreads beyond the two names at the center like wildfire. That is the pattern with this rivalry. Nobody at the top loses. Rick Ross is still stacking. 50 Cent is still stacking. Rick Ross has restaurants, real estate, and a music catalog that prints. 50 Cent has shows on television, a booming spirits empire, and a documentary war chest that keeps him relevant every quarter. Both men are literally winning while they beef. But the people around them, the kids, the mothers, the friends, the ex-associates, those are the ones catching the fallout while Rick Ross and 50 Cent keep it moving like nothing happened. Now let's zoom back in on the Mahogany Caskets visual. Because this is the part where opinions split the culture in half. The bar Rick Ross delivers on the track goes directly at 50 Cent. Rick Ross says the equivalent of, "Forget 50 Cent, they never walk away," and that goes for many men. That last part is the sword through the ribs. Because Many Men is arguably the most iconic 50 Cent song ever recorded. Many Men is 50 Cent's autobiography in 3 verses. Many Men is the record that turned 50 Cent from a Queens rapper into a global myth. So when Rick Ross flips Many Men into the punchline of a body on the floor visual, that is not a jab. That is a stab. That is a targeted disrespect aimed at the specific song that defines 50 Cent's survival story. And in case anybody missed the point, the visual leaves nothing to interpretation. A figure on the floor. A white sheet. Yellow tape. A crime scene reenactment. Peep this, Rick Ross is not implying anything. Rick Ross is drawing you a picture. So the question that has hip-hop split down the middle right now is simple. Did Rick Ross cross the line? Or is this exactly what rap beef is supposed to be? Let me be transparent. I am not going to sit here and pretend I don't like the song. The song is hard. The production on Set in Stone is clean from top to bottom. The bars are sharp. T.I. shows up focused. Rick Ross sounds like a man who has been holding this energy in for a decade. As a piece of music, Mahogany Caskets belongs on the playlist. I plan to review the entire album in a full breakdown soon, so make sure notifications are on for that one. But separating the record from the visual is impossible right now. Because the visual is the story. The visual is what people are talking about. And when I saw that scene the first time, I stopped the video and said out loud, "Bro, is it really that deep?" Now let's flip the coin. Because Rick Ross is not the only one throwing hands here. 50 Cent has spoken on Rick Ross' son more than once. 50 Cent has cracked jokes about Rick Ross' family situation. 50 Cent has flown out the woman who had a child with Rick Ross. And 50 Cent has never, not one time, offered a public apology or a walkback. So Rick Ross fans have a legitimate argument when they say Rick Ross is finally responding after years of taking blows to the household. That argument is real. That argument has weight. But then Rick Ross himself has made comments about 50 Cent's son over the years, comments that were arguably just as ugly. There is a moment on record where Rick Ross referenced 50 Cent's youngest son directly, talking about taking him fishing back when they were on friendlier ground, and using that story now as a receipt in the beef. And once you drag the kids into grown man drama, the whole thing starts to look messy. Because those kids did not sign up for this. Those kids did not choose to be born into a 19-year rap war between two mogul-level artists. And whether we are talking about 50 Cent's son or Rick Ross' son, the same rule applies, the children should not be receipts. 50 Cent's son in particular has walked a difficult road publicly. 50 Cent's own family drama has played out on timelines for years. 50 Cent has clashed with the mother of that child on more occasions than anyone can count. 50 Cent has posted, deleted, reposted, and roasted. And through all of that, the kid has been forced to watch the whole thing unfold in front of the internet. So when Rick Ross brings that same kid into a bar, the sympathy meter tilts hard. Grown men grow, or they don't. Here's another wrinkle. 50 Cent fired back with a comment aimed straight at Rick Ross' album numbers. 50 Cent posted, "I just saw your record sales. Laugh out loud. 2000. What the?" Turning the exchange into a sales scoreboard. And that is where 50 Cent absolutely knows what he's doing. Because 50 Cent came up in the era when first week numbers were the crown. Get Rich or Die Tryin' was a cultural earthquake. The massacre reportedly moved close to 1 million units in its opening week. 50 Cent went bar for bar with Kanye West in the legendary Graduation vs. Curtis sales battle, and even though Kanye West came out on top with numbers reported somewhere in the range of 900,000 to Curtis 700,000, that showdown made first week sales feel like an Olympic event. So when 50 Cent points at Rick Ross sales, he is pulling from muscle memory. That is 50 Cent's home court. But here is the reality check on that shot. Nobody sells records like that anymore. The album cycle is broken. Streaming has replaced ownership. Playlists have replaced radio. And any rapper, including 50 Cent himself, putting out a brand new full-length album today would face the exact same soft first-week reality. So is 50 Cent's sales roast fair game? Sure. Is it the whole picture? Absolutely not. Now let's talk about the moment that told me exactly how deep this really goes. Rick Ross recently walked up to Fat Joe and Jadakiss during a casual moment and brought up 50 Cent completely unprompted. Neither Fat Joe nor Jadakiss was talking about 50 Cent. Neither one was steering the conversation there. But Rick Ross rolled in and dropped the name anyway. That single moment tells you Rick Ross is not just responding when 50 Cent pokes him. Rick Ross is thinking about 50 Cent when the mic is not even on him. And listen closely, Fat Joe and Jadakiss both had real, documented issues with 50 Cent in their own eras. Fat Joe had a full multi-year Cold War with 50 Cent. Jadakiss got dragged in the same wave. But both of them eventually found a way to squash it. Because the New York connection carried weight. Because the mutual respect for the city eventually outweighed the ego. So when Rick Ross was asked whether he would ever squash it with 50 Cent, Rick Ross made it clear, Rick Ross is not looking for peace. Rick Ross is looking for the next chance to clown 50 Cent publicly. And 50 Cent will absolutely take that bait every time. Here is the piece I want to sit with. Rick Ross went on to talk about 50 Cent's living situation. Rick Ross went on to say 50 Cent lives in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Rick Ross went on to say 50 Cent does not own his masters. Rick Ross went on to name-drop Eminem and Dr. Dre as the men who saved 50 Cent's career. Rick Ross said it in front of cameras. And 50 Cent's team pushed back immediately, pointing out that 50 Cent just delivered a documentary that dominated streaming charts for weeks. Rick Ross clapped back that 50 Cent did not own the doc, that they just slapped his name on it and paid him a bag. That is where you can tell Rick Ross has been building this dossier for a long time. Rick Ross has receipts. Rick Ross has counterpunches loaded and ready. But let's keep it 100 with each other. Do you actually believe 50 Cent lives in some tiny 2-bedroom apartment? Come on. 50 Cent owns real estate. 50 Cent has been photographed in mansions for 2 decades. Even if 50 Cent downsized for tax purposes, so what? Why is where a man sleeps supposed to be the diss? 50 Cent already lived the lifestyle, already flexed the estates, already built and sold effin' vodka and stacked Sire spirits into a 9-figure conversation. 50 Cent has nothing to prove on that lane. So Rick Ross swinging at 50 Cent's zip code feels like reaching. It feels like a bar that sounds good in the studio but does not actually land in real life. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's sales roast at Rick Ross has its own weakness. Because Rick Ross' catalog is deeper than one album cycle. Rick Ross has been putting out consistent music for almost 20 years. Rick Ross has a run of albums that critics still respect. Rick Ross has hits that get played at every cookout in America every summer. So if we are keeping the score honest, both men have weapons the other cannot fully neutralize. Now here's the question that everybody should be asking. At what point do grown men grow up? Rick Ross is a grandfather. Let that land. Rick Ross has grandchildren. 50 Cent's son is old enough to be his own man. Both artists have adult children in the industry, watching this exchange play out in real time. Both artists have built businesses that employ dozens of people. Both artists have legacies that will outlive them. And yet, in the summer of 2026, both of them are still throwing shots that would sound corny coming from a first-time mixtape rapper. That is the disconnect. When you are 22 and hungry, rap beef is fuel. When you are 50 and rich, rap beef starts to look like a hobby you refuse to age out of. And I get it, Rick Ross has been mocked, clowned, exposed, and disrespected by 50 Cent over and over again. If somebody spent 19 years jabbing at your household, of course you're going to swing back. But there is a way to swing back that looks strategic and there is a way to swing back that looks tired. The Mahogany Caskets visual, the body, the sheet, the yellow tape, that lands on the tired side of the ledger for me. And I say that as someone who genuinely enjoys the record. The bars are sharp. The delivery is boss. The TI verse works. But that specific visual, at that specific stage of Rick Ross' career, is the piece I keep looping in my head. Because Rick Ross does not need it. Rick Ross has money. Rick Ross has status. Rick Ross could have dropped the same track with different visuals and still ended 50 Cent's whole month. And on 50 Cent's side, the household shots and the sales scoreboard are running out of gas too. Because we have heard it. We have seen the memes. We have seen the reposts. There is nothing new. There is nothing fresh. There is only the reheated version of a beef that has been simmering since the mid-2000s. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Hip-hop culture is getting older. The founders are still standing, still working, still stacking. But the way they beef has not evolved with them. Gunplay recently mentioned he might pop up on Tony Yayo and Uncle Murder's show, a moment that could have been a genuinely funny, honest, memorable conversation between veterans. Instead, the response online was, "We know you're coming because you got nothing else going on." And that right there is the disease. Anytime somebody in hip-hop tries to grow, evolve, or extend a peace offering, the culture punishes them for it. But when they stay stuck in beef, we punish them for that too. There is no winning path unless the artists themselves decide to raise the bar. Rick Ross has raised the bar for his city. Rick Ross has raised the bar for independent business inside hip-hop. 50 Cent has raised the bar for how a rapper transitions into film, television, and spirits. Both men have blueprints that younger artists study. So the question, and this is where I want your honest answer in the comments, is why the same men who wrote those blueprints keep playing in the sandbox when it comes to each other. Roll the tape one more time. Clip, Rick Ross laughing about his history with 50 Cent, followed by 50 Cent's response online. That is where we are in 2026. Two icons. Two legacies. One body on the floor in a music video. And a whole culture watching to see who blinks first. Now let me hand it to you. Because you are the jury, not me. Did Rick Ross cross the line with the Mahogany Caskets visual? Or was that exactly the kind of shot 50 Cent has been asking for after 19 years of throwing rocks at Rick Ross' household? Was 50 Cent's sales joke, the laugh out loud, 2000 line, a fair punch, or is it a lazy jab from a man who knows first week sales don't measure success anymore? And here is the real one, which of these two icons still has the stronger grip on hip-hop culture in 2026? Because J Hood sparked a whole conversation recently asking whether 50 Cent could sell out Yankee Stadium for 3 straight nights the way Jay-Z did. Some people said absolutely. Some people said no way. Some people said Rick Ross could not do it either. So drop your verdict below. Could 50 Cent fill Yankee Stadium 3 nights in a row? Could Rick Ross? Or is that era of Arena King rapper officially closed? And on the music side, even if Rick Ross is no longer moving platinum first week numbers, can you still respect what Rick Ross brings to the booth? Because the bars on Set in Stone are proof that Rick Ross has not lost the pen. Even if 50 Cent is no longer running the Billboard board, can you still respect what 50 Cent built with Get Rich or Die Tryin', The Massacre, and every empire he expanded after? I want the honest answer. Not the fan answer. The honest one. Tell me where you stand. Was Rick Ross wrong for the visual? Was 50 Cent wrong for the sun shots? Was T.I. wrong for jumping in? Are you Team Ross, Team 50, or Team, y'all are too old for this? Drop it in the comments and be as detailed as you want, because I read them. I really do. If this breakdown gave you something to chew on, do me a favor, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next round of this saga. Because I promise you, this Rick Ross vs 50 Cent story is not ending anytime soon. There will be a response. There will be a counter-response. There will be another visual. There will be another meme. And when it drops, you already know where to be. That's the tea served hot. I'll catch you on the next round. Peace.